13 months of hard work on Strikeforce Durangan came to a head yesterday when police charged Trevor Fing with 1 count of money laundering and 8 counts of obtaining a benefit by deception. It's alleged Fing used fake IDs and bogus company names to set up bank accounts at the Commonwealth Bank and Citibank in Australia and the Sonaris Bank and Parex Bank overseas to steal $1.5 million from a superannuation company.
The cheques were put through those accounts and transferred through Latvia and Lithuania, and a substantial amount of money was drawn in the Newcastle area.
Fing was before Newcastle local court, charged with intimidating a police officer at the time of his arrest.
We executed 3 search warrants in the Newcastle area, 2 on residential premises and 1 on a business premises, and we seized a number of high-performance motor vehicles.
The 3 cars and dirt bike worth around $500,000 are being kept under tight security here at this Newcastle auction centre. Fing is yet to enter a plea and will front Newcastle local court on September 13. Madeline Bond, NBN News.
Health services at Singleton Hospital are said to be the beneficiary of the latest Hunter New England Health sell-off, but in the 20 months since news broke that the land on the southern side of the hospital would be sold, residents have fought the plan all the way to state parliament because they believe the town needs more health facilities.
Private hospital and all the services go with it, your aged care, looking more on where it's looking for respite, not for any of the elderly, for the young ones.
And the public interest in the sale made for a full gallery as 12 registered bidders took the price for the 3-hectare block from $400,000 to over $1 million. The block was passed in, but negotiations are underway with the losing bidder. Meantime, separate negotiations continue for the sale of the former Dudley nursing home site. It was passed in after bidding top $5.6 million, and the selling agent is optimistic about the prospects for a sale. Gary Blair, NBN News.
It was this parcel of bush off Soldiers Point Road at Anna Bay that was earmarked for the $50 million proposal. The plan would have seen 28 hectares of native vegetation make way for a 150-room, 3-storey hotel and 234 tourist units. But the Minister for Planning, Frank Sartor, vetoed the proposal, concerned of the impact on threatened koala, squirrel glider and flying fox species.
The problems with wetlands, flooding and isolation wouldn't seem to make it an appropriate site for the development. So we're quite happy that the Minister has come in and stopped it at this stage.
In the pipeline for more than 12 months, Council has faced an anxious wait to see whether the Minister would grant the tourist resort proposal approval. And while news of its rejection was today welcomed, Mayor Craig Bowman admits there's mounting concern over other proposals, which could gain ministerial approval without Council's consent.
There are quite a few proposals that were approved under the old coastal policy, and they've created all sorts of problems, especially on the Tomaree Peninsula.
Council is hoping those mistakes won't be repeated.
We've had meetings with the Minister and he will listen to reason. It's the ones that slipped through the net that we're a bit worried about.
Christy Carter, NBN News.
Hundreds of large steel trestles and 57 modules full of equipment are being loaded for their trip to Norway. Put together, the parts will make a 2-kilometre-long conveyor belt system to be used in an aluminium smelter. Tomago-based company ReadySpan and its 40 workers have spent the past year on the $15 million project for an international construction company.
They invited us to join them in this venture in Norway with the potential for another 4 or 5 scattered at other places around the world.
Meantime, the Newcastle Cruising Yacht Club may have finally jumped through all the state government planning hoops with the construction of its new clubhouse on this land, now 2 years overdue. Tenders are expected to be called in the next 2 months.
It's unheard of, but there was 98 conditions on our consent and 20 of them were unacceptable, and we've had to go through those things and straighten that out.
The club begins its yacht racing season with a sail past at 10:30 this Saturday. A new Sunday racing course will take yachts around Nobbies and offshore past Newcastle and Bar Beaches this year. Paul Lobb, NBN News.
Commercials are airing Australia-wide, enticing us to explore our own backyard. An additional $100 million has been spent in the last few years on advertising domestic tourism, including this one for the mid-north coast, promoting the sun, surf and sand. But a new report commissioned by the federal government has revealed that domestic tourism is on the decline. That comes as no surprise to the Hunter Tourism Organisation. Just take a look at Newcastle's main beach. The latest Hunter figures show an 8.3% drop in domestic overnight visitors compared to the same time last year. The reason? Skyrocketing petrol prices and those interest rate hikes.
And I guess one of the underlying problems nationally, not just for the Hunter, is the fact that Australians aren't taking their annual leave as they have in the past. They tend to be hoarding their holidays.
The average Australian took 5 domestic trips a year in 1985, while in 2005 that figure has fallen to just 4.3 trips. That's despite an increase in the population and in wages. And in spite of terrorism fears, the number of nights we spend overseas has risen by 32% since 2003.
The growth of low-cost carriers, and we've seen just in the last month Jetstar expanding into Asia, has meant that it's more affordable than ever for Australians to travel overseas.
Jane Goldsmith, NBN News. State-of-the-art, this new fluoroscopy imaging machine at the John Hunter Hospital is a medical breakthrough. Funded by a $600,000 state government grant, it's able to provide faster, more accurate scans and minimises the amount of radiation exposure for patients. Used for patients with intestinal illnesses, the computer imaging machine can now diagnose stroke and head injuries.
Provide for diagnostic assessments for patients, particularly those who have urinary tract and gastrointestinal issues, but it also means that we've got a state-of-the-art machine which means less radiation, particularly for younger people.
The funding boost will also benefit cancer patients at the Mater Hospital through the upgrade of its PET scanner so doctors can differentiate cancer cells from normal tissue.
So the upgrade to the machine means it's got a higher resonance capacity.
In a first for the Mater, the upgraded PET scanner allows some patients to receive a Medicare rebate for costly lung cancer scans. But the Minister says that's not enough. He's calling on the Commonwealth to open the rebate system to patients with other conditions.
The fact that they can't get a Medicare rebate for it makes it very difficult for those particular patients.
Christy Carter, NBN News. He was an obvious absentee, an empty place setting left to pay tribute to Len Evans, a man well loved by the Hunter Valley wine community.
He's the bon vivant of the industry. He put Australian wine on the map. He made all of us, back from when he started in the early 60s, conscious of table wine.
Before any of the awards formalities began, a rather fitting toast from his colleagues to the man known for taking the pretentiousness out of wine. His list of achievements over the last 75 years is truly extraordinary, excelling as a wine writer, marketer, international judge, winemaker and philanthropist, raising more than $10 million for charity.
I've had a fantastic 41 years in the industry, which has been enormous fun, and I've done everything virtually. I haven't been a wholesaler, I think I've done everything else.
Close friend Ian Riggs dined with Len and his family on Wednesday night.
Well, the interesting thing is he only recently received a new pacemaker, and some would say he's never looked better.
But Len is understood to have suffered a heart attack at the wheel of his car while picking up a relative from the John Hunter Hospital.
The way I describe it is that when people sit down and have a meal and have a glass of wine, they ought to have Len Evans' commitment to the Australian wine industry in the back of their mind.
A few concerned Charlestown residents joined councillors and politicians last night for a briefing session on the proposed land sale. The owners of Charlestown Square want to expand the shopping centre onto council-owned land worth $10.2 million, which includes Ferris Oval. But the Mayor says the deal is bogged down in legal discussions.
Whether or not Ferris Oval would be, first of all, would be sold to General Property Trust, or whether it would be sold to a bowling club, and how the dealings are carried out between those parties. It's quite complex, and there's still no agreement on what is the best process.
People who live nearby are worried about noise and dust from the construction of the expanded centre, and the Mayor says all those issues need to be sorted out before the deal can proceed.
Any one of those could be circuit breakers in the whole process, such as, say, reclassification, rezoning, road closures. So there's always that possibility. What General Property Trust might do based on delays will be up to them.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
You know, to get them out in the fresh air, the sunshine, connecting with gardens again, it's a really positive thing to get out of the classroom and I think learn a little bit about nature.
Nelson Bay only just beat Macquarie last weekend and in doing so bagged the Blues a ticket into the major semi-final. They're not so sure if that's a bonus or not, set to play Lakes, who've enjoyed a week off.
Sometimes the bye helps and doesn't help, you know what I mean? So we'll see how they go. They've got a couple of players out, but we'll turn up, and I'm sure they'll turn up on Sunday ready to play some good football.
Tomorrow, Cessnock is out to continue its late season charge in front of what's expected to be another vocal Toronto crowd.
We've been beaten once in the last 8 weeks, but it's week to week for us at the moment. We've got 3 sides to beat, but at the moment we've got one side to get past. So without getting past them, we haven't got much to look forward to.
6 Hunter rugby players, including Scone's Josh Clift, have plenty to look forward to, named in the Cockatoos squad for a tour of Fiji in October. Club duties come first though, and the Waratahs must win with a bonus point to steal the minor premiership from Wanderers, while Singleton needs results to fall its way to feature in the top 5. Adam McKilrick, NBN News.
With injuries, with possible suspensions, with players who are carrying slight knocks, it's provided a major headache for me, major headache.
A long-distance swimmer, Shelley Clark, was nowhere near open water today.
Because it's too cold.
And when you are swimming over 25 kilometres, you'd want to make sure you're comfortable. In an Olympic-sized pool, that's 500 laps. Clark says she rarely swims that far in training. It's more around the 200 mark. Preparation which doubles for the 5-kilometre event.
It's an event you get to do over and over, so it's an event you get to perfect. And it's short, it's only an hour long, so I can't wait to have that. So that's my fun event.
It's the 25-kilometre race which presents the challenge. However, Clark remains the country's top-ranked woman over that distance. As such, the 5-time national rep will join 5 other Aussies on Monday, bound for the Open Water World Championship in Naples.
It's going to be very up in the air this year because the current world champion is pregnant, and the girl who finished second was disqualified in her German championships, and so it's a wide open event.
Should Shelley win, she'll get a pat on the back, and that's about it. Commitment you can't fault, especially with 25 k's of open water ahead of you. Adam McKilrick, NBN News.
Joey's downgraded 2-week suspension is a win for common sense, but it's still inappropriate. Yes, there is a problem with referees being abused and verbalised across Australia, particularly in country areas, and there needs to be a line in the sand that's important for our game. But in last Friday night's match between the Knights and Manly, linesman Matt Chechen made a mistake. That's because he's human. Joey Johns also made a mistake by reacting. He's human as well. David Gallop should have pulled both these guys into his office and sorted it out early in the week. Chechen wasn't dropped for this weekend's round of matches, and that's good. And Joey Johns shouldn't be either. What I think's appropriate was a fine, along with serving some time in an active role in the government's new initiative course called Sports Rage, which promotes good sportsmanship and non-abuse. That's a win for everyone. Lesson learned. Instead, because the NRL was furious that Joey was quoted in an article stating that he wasn't sorry, and the fact that Michael Hagan, the coach, supported him in the aftermatch comments, they've talked themselves into believing that they have to show a defiant Johns a lesson for the benefit of the game. But instead, what they've done is blurred the judicial system. Now we have no real solid standpoint in contrary conduct ratings. It's subjective to how the NRL feels. Now, sure, Joey was animated, he was swearing, and that needed to be addressed, but a grade 3 is just incomprehensible. There's no one else who's performed a similar verbal abuse on an official that's been subject to the severity. You may ask why. It's because they're trying to make an example of Joey's defiance. Anyway, it's been a big week. Let's have a look at round 24. I like the Bulldogs tonight. Saturday, 3 games, Sharks, Storm and the Knights. And on Sunday, it's the Eels, Manly and the Dragons. Have a great weekend. I'll see you next week.
The Adstein Marinda tug danced around the harbour in celebration of the start of the sailing season, the vessel putting on a watery show for onlookers. The only local yacht to finish the disastrous 1998 Sydney to Hobart race was among the 40 vessels in this morning's passing parade, each blessed for safety by Reverend John Crane and given some hearty advice by a sea scurvy pirate. Today was also a commemoration for the casualties of the sea, the relatives of the men killed when the BHP ore carrier Iron Knight was torpedoed by a Japanese sub, gathering to remember them. The ship, which sank in 1943, was recently discovered off the coast of Bermagui on the south coast, found by chance by fishermen whose nets were caught on the underwater relic.
When they went down, they found it was a beautifully intact relica of the ship, and it was in good condition in so much it had been down there for quite a number of years.
63 years after it sank, the Discovery finally gave the families of those who died a chance to say goodbye.
We were taken out on a little fishing trawler type vessel, and we had a service with some other relatives from the Iron Knight, and we had a service over the vessel, over the wreck. It was very moving.
The wreck has officially been declared a war grave, but there's now hope a permanent memorial will be erected at the site. Christy Carter, NBN News.
The Waratahs needed to win with a bonus point if they were any chance of stealing the minor premiership. But the visitors were going to have to work for it. Wanderers fly half Michael Delors made sure of that, his kick finding Ben Sattler. The two Blues first to score, but the Waratahs had the final say. To the round ball game, and it was sudden death at Whitebridge in NBN soccer as both Azuri and Broadmeadow played an aggressive style of football. The hosts were first to score after a clumsy yet valuable strike from James Money clipped the goalkeeper. In the second half, an Azuri yellow card put Broadmeadow in the zone. Even then, the visitors needed much more than field position. Magic just couldn't take a trick until John Majerowski slipped one through to equalise.
Early this afternoon, a 35-year-old woman and a 38-year-old man were airlifted from Wootton near Bulahdelah to the John Hunter Hospital. The pair had been competing in a rally when they lost control of their car and hit a tree at 160 kilometres per hour. They're being treated for back injuries and are both in a stable condition. Earlier today, an 11-year-old girl was transported from the Cooranbong Equestrian Centre to the John Hunter. She suffered serious head and possible spinal injuries after falling from her horse and is reported to be in a serious condition. Madeline Bond, NBN News. Glenn Williams was surprised when this white bull terrier approached him and his friends last night. What was more surprising though was the fact no one would take the stray off his hands.
We rang the local council, Lake Macquarie City Council, we rang the RSPCA after hours, and after we had no luck with them telling us simply just to let him go back on the streets, we even rang Belmont Police.
According to the RSPCA, advising people to let strays go is not uncommon.
Unfortunately, because there's no resource for stray dogs after hours, if they're not able to hold on to it and not able to deliver it anywhere, then they just need to let it go.
However, Mr. Williams was uneasy about unleashing the potentially dangerous breed, concerned that these powerful jaws could cause injury.
I'd say if a small dog got past or he got out in the street in front of traffic, it could be a major problem to a lot of people.
Left with no alternative, the Williams today took the dog to the RSPCA's Ties Hill surrender cage. When they arrived, all 3 cages were locked, and it was only because of 8-year-old Nicholas's tiny hands that they were able to deposit the dog. It's now in the care of the RSPCA. Madeline Bond, NBN News.
It was every bit the battle at Belmont, Nelson Bay suffering the first casualty in Jake Kerr. Both teams scored early and things were pretty much equal until Dane Campbell linked with Daniel Frame to put Lakes in front. Scott Collins broke free for Lakes as the hosts continued to threaten, but Nelson Bay got the ball back and Shane McIntyre didn't let go. A 2-point lead not good enough for the Seagulls, a Dane Campbell kick eventually finding Tom Ryan to score his second. The fleet-footed fullback was on track to score another but ended up doing the legwork before Jason Allen finished off in what was to be their last try.
A transport interchange linking rail, buses and cars in the growing central Lake Macquarie suburb of Glendale is seen as crucial to the future of transport in the Lower Hunter. So when the state government revealed its plans ahead of the tender process for the $50 million interchange, some alarm bells rang.
It does not include an integral part of the original Glendale interchange plan, and that is the road overpass. Without an overpass, you haven't got a practical way for the workers and the people that live in that area to get to A to B in a safe way in the Glendale-Cardiff area.
Lake MP Jeff Hunter says a road bridge between the supercentre and the growing Cardiff industrial estate would be too expensive. But Mayor Greg Piper says the plan won't work without the bridge.
At the end of the day, to do the job properly, this overpass needs to be there, and the community has expected this for years now. We're not going to let this go.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
The Greens at Western aren't running as quick these days. Much like the bowling club's sale, it's been a slow process.
Being such an unusual and unique site, it definitely wasn't a walk in the park.
The club was shut down last year by the state's licensing court after it was taken over by members of the Bandidos motorcycle gang and allegedly used for criminal activities. Ever since, its days as a bowling club have been numbered, and 14 months on, the land and clubhouse have finally been sold. The site's set to undergo a massive transformation.
There has been some thought from the purchaser with some ideas on possibly some aged care men's housing. Of course, that's going to be subject to council approval.
Passed in at auction, it was then negotiated to sell for $450,000. A condition of its sale was that proceeds be shared between local charities, the Cancer Council among them.
We're actually running a Living with Cancer education program in Cessnock at the end of September, and so the money will also be used for some sun protection resources for local schools.
Adam McIlrick, NBN News.
Since the introduction of the Swimming Pools Act 1992, the number of children aged under 5 to have drowned in private pools has dropped from 10 in that year to 3 in 2005. While that's an improvement, the Department of Local Government believes it's not good enough and is now reviewing the regulation.
We can't rest on our laurels. We can't say that close enough is good enough. We've got to ensure that we have the best legislation to address pool drownings.
The department has compiled a discussion paper on the review, which will be open for public comment from Wednesday. One of the options being considered to help improve pool safety involves having annual council inspections to ensure that fences comply with safety regulations. More than likely, pool owners would be forced to pay for the service every year.
I'd encourage people, if they're concerned about paying council inspectors to come out and look at their fence, to have a look at the discussion paper, lodge your submissions and ensure that your voice is heard.
The paper will be available on www.dlg.nsw.gov.au, with public comments welcome until December 15. Madeline Bond, NBN News.
The flags were raised on another council beach season today, and there were plenty of people lucky enough to make the most of the warmer than normal weather.
It's been a very mild winter and even the water's been extremely warm. We haven't had the bone-chilling temperatures of 14 to 15 degrees. It's been predominantly around the 17-degree mark, so it's been a very mild winter.
With the beach season now underway, professional lifeguards warn that only the area between the red and yellow flags is patrolled.
All our beaches from Stockton through to Merriweather are now patrolled from 9 till 5:30am. Newcastle with its 2 lifeguards is 7 till 5:30.
Meantime, Newcastle councillors will have the future of the Stockton Beach kiosk in their hands at tomorrow night's meeting. The people who lease the cafe-style kiosk from council want to build an outdoor deck and open it for restaurant-style dinners until 11pm. But council officers are likely to slap a 9pm restriction on the restaurant plan. Paul Lobb, NBN News.
For many retired Aussies, lengthy road trips exploring our country's vast regions is what their twilight years are all about. However, due to spiralling petrol prices, the popular dream has become almost a too costly reality for our grey nomads, forcing them to either give it up or seriously curb their caravanning adventures.
We find the vehicle we're driving use a fair bit of fuel, so we're limiting our distances.
You just got to watch the dollars a bit more now because they don't travel as far as they used to.
Even those who can afford the extra cost of the Bowser are choosing to stay closer to home.
And I don't mind the petrol prices rising. You just do your trip a little bit slower and go less around Australia.
Despite the petrol price hike, occupancy rates at the Belmont Pines Lakeside Holiday Park haven't changed. What is different though is the length of time people are staying.
And a good thing is that they spend a little bit longer in a spot instead of going, they can't afford to spend too much time on the road, so they're in your park a little bit longer.
We're also thinking instead of going away for a week at a time, various stages, we'll go away for a fortnight and not go away so often.
We used to stay for one night, then we'd travel. Now we're staying a week at a time.
Madeline Bond, NBN News.
It looked bad on the night. Anthony Quinn flipped in the air with Clint Amos and Steve Southern placed on report for a dangerous throw. They were both charged, but neither will be suspended should they take an early guilty plea. It's the same story for Danny Badiris. His tackle on Matt Bowen deemed careless but not bad enough to miss a match. The club expects to have the charge downgraded even further, given his clean record at the judiciary. The real danger for the Cowboys on Saturday night came via teenage halfback Jared Mullen, who was a standout despite serious injury. Filling the rather large shoes left by the suspended Andrew Johns, it was a dozen pain-killing injections before and during the game that proved just as tough.
If it was early in the season, I probably wouldn't have got the needles. Just rest it until it's right. But semi-final time, Joe was out, and they just needed someone to lead him around the park, and I thought I could do that job.
And what a job it was, scoring a try and setting up another one for 100 gamer Anthony Quinn. Mullen then slotted a match-sealing field goal to wrap up the game and keep a top 4 finish well on track. The 19-year-old also learning how to order his more seasoned teammates around the park as well.
A couple of times, forward they get tired and they don't really listen, but you just got to shout at them a couple of times and they listen to you.
Representatives from all A-League clubs were happy enough to gather in Sydney today before the hostilities begin at the weekend. Again, Sydney will start as premiership favourites, but with Season 2 launched today, there's a long list of clubs ready to take that title, none more so than Newcastle. Finishing 4th in the pre-season tournament at the weekend, the Jets have some issues in the lead-up to the season opener in New Zealand. Australian defender Jade North didn't train again today and is at long odds to play, leaving the door open for Kiwi international Stephen Old to make his club debut, while Shane Webb is also an option. Some good news though, with fellow defender Andrew Durante declaring he'll be fine despite some knee soreness.
Just had a bit of tendonitis in the patella, but I trained this morning and it felt all right, so I should be fine.
Missing the entire season last year after a horrible leg fracture, he's not about to prolong his league debut another week.
That's right, it's been a long time for me. Obviously I missed the first season, so looking forward very much to this first game.
But given all the distractions both on and off the field this pre-season for Newcastle, all the Jets are looking forward to taking off this Sunday.
It seems we have the worst attitude in New South Wales when it comes to drink driving. That's according to insurer AAMI. It's suggesting drivers in the Hunter region are ignoring years of road safety campaigns and harsh penalties, prompting police to repeat the warnings today.
Those that do want to disregard it will be caught eventually, whether it be tomorrow or next year, and they will be brought before the courts.
42% of Hunter motorists surveyed by AAMI admitted to driving while over the limit, and 12% think that it's okay to drive after a few drinks. That's particularly disturbing to Northern Region Traffic Coordinator Mal Reid, who's been called to the scene of countless horrific crashes.
That is concerning because that is one of the 4 major causes of serious injury and fatal crashes in this region.
Another cause of fatal crashes, speeding, and the survey shows a startling 90% of Hunter drivers speed at least some of the time and 39% drive over the speed limit to get to work or home sooner. And what's happened to Stop, Revive, Survive, with almost a quarter of Hunter motorists admitting that they have fallen asleep at the wheel. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
He's headed several of Australia's biggest organisations, from Sydney Water to Energy Australia. Today, Paul Broad, who was born and educated in Newcastle, addressed the region's leading businessmen and women about the dismal amount of state government funding the area receives each year.
Newcastle gets a poor share of the cake. If you go through the budget and break it up for education, health, transport, you note over the last 11 years Newcastle has lagged considerably behind the rest of the state.
According to Mr Broad, Newcastle gets less than half the amount of funding per capita for education, health and transport in comparison to Sydney. He says it's now up to the local business sector to do something about it.
Business people can't sit on their hands any longer. They can't keep saying it's a local representative's problem. It's our problem.
Mr Broad believes changing the Lower Hunters local government structure and combining the region's wealth could be a way to fix the problem.
I think the council structures we have are about 100 years out of date. We should be talking about a regional council representing the collective views of the Lower Hunter.
Madeline Bond, NBN News.
Once known as the Steelworks Course, golfers have been enjoying the leafy surrounds at this site since 1936. Now called Shortland Waters, big plans will go to Newcastle Council tonight for 110 holiday apartments nestled into the bush.
The actual construction of them will be no more than 3 stories to fit in with the tree line of the trees around the course. It's been designed to fit in harmoniously with their surroundings. They will be basically a self-contained holiday accommodation and open to all members of the public who are holidaying in the Newcastle area.
In a clever arrangement, the golf club will sell part of its land to Hilton Grujon's company, Hunter Land, which will build the apartments and then pay a percentage of strata fees back to the club each year. And the extra accommodation will be welcomed.
A healthy shortage out in this area. There's very little out around our area at all. We've had in our marketing areas and looking at our strategies, both the university and the wetlands showed a great need for such accommodation in this area.
The much-loved big ball will have to be moved elsewhere on the course, but will get a facelift. The plan has been recommended for approval at tonight's Newcastle Council meeting. Paul Lobb, NBN News.
4 major revolutions over the past 25 years have rocked and irreversibly changed the Australian way of life, according to social researcher Hugh Mackay, who led a lecture on social change last night. The gender revolution means women are now socially on par with men and are choosing to get married and have children much later in life, if at all. Meanwhile, an increased reliance on technology means many Aussies are forgetting how to talk to each other. That, in combination with the economic and multicultural revolution, has led to a generation of people who are constantly on the prowl for something better and reluctant to commit to anything, whether it be a partner, job or political alliance. He says many under 30s prefer to watch lifestyle shows rather than stay up to date with news and current affairs. Madeline Bond, NBN News.
It doesn't mean much to most, but to Associate Professor Stuart Franks, this map shows the birth of something that could signal even harder times for farmers across regional Australia.
We've been looking at the variables that we know are important in El Niño development. That includes things like sea surface temperatures, air temperatures, pressures and wind speeds. When we look at all these together, we see reasonably strong signs of El Niño development.
The University of Newcastle hydroclimatologist believes there's a 67% chance we'll experience the climatic condition by December. Characterised by very dry conditions, El Niño events occur irregularly every 5 to 7 years and often have major economic impacts. The effect is responsible for dust storms, bushfires and severe drought.
It's not to say that the El Niño is going to be any worse or any better than any of the others, but the problem we have now is that we're already in drought, and now it seems that if this El Niño does come, it'll be drought on top of drought.
The Bureau of Meteorology says while it looks like we're stuck with below average rainfall for the rest of the year, key indicators haven't reached the criteria needed to classify an El Niño.
It's a very arbitrary decision if we actually declare it as an El Niño because we're already experiencing these dry conditions for the rest of the year.
Jessica Phyllis, NBN News.
She stole the hearts of Australian punters for years, but now Makybe Diva is gearing up for a romance made in science. Following extensive research by blood analysts, Epsom Derby winner Galileo emerged as the ideal suitor for the Melbourne Cup champion. While the stallion and 6 other new arrivals were getting acquainted with their new surroundings, the diva was enjoying some well-earned private time before hopefully becoming a mum.
Makybe's happily grazing just a few paddocks away from us, and Galileo, once he settles into his routine here, he's stable at night and has a little exercise in his paddock then during the day.
Resident stallions such as Schwazir, Fastnet Rock and Danehill Dancer are just a few of the famous long faces already at work at Coolmore. At $176,000 a service, even early favourite Encosta de Lago didn't make the diva cut. Makybe and Galileo will now be closely monitored by vets before Australia's newest thoroughbred champion can be conceived. Along with Galileo, the 6 stallions from Ireland will be in high demand during the stud's busiest period of the year.
Rocket Gibraltar, who also arrived this morning, he won 7 European Group 1s in a row, a feat that no other horse has ever never achieved before.
Mitchell Hughes, NBN News.
It was the match that created all the headlines last week, for all the wrong reasons. Andrew John suspended for 2 weeks for swearing at a touch judge. And the emotion flowed after the match as well.
I think he'd be entitled to swear at him, really. Wouldn't you?
It's a comment the NRL believes should cost Newcastle $5,000. However, the club will argue against.
Certainly lodging an appeal on the fine. I've got no intention of discussing what the basis of that appeal is prior to the appeal being lodged and heard, but yes, we certainly are lodging an appeal.
It's understood the defence will centre on one crucial word in the statement, nearly, which the club will claim went largely unnoticed in subsequent reports. On matters football, Michael Hagan believes the side can't afford to waste time wondering just where it will finish in final standings, rather just look at beating Penrith before enjoying the bye.
I don't think that helps anyone, and I think we've got enough reasons to want to play well on Saturday without worrying about where we might finish and what might happen to other teams.
The coach has named an unchanged lineup for the last home game of the season. However, several players with niggling injuries will be monitored throughout the week. Jim Callanan, NBN News. While the tug-of-war between Newcastle and Verona continues for the services of Jesse Van Straten, Ben Kennedy has simply gone about his business. Still just 19, the local junior has been in and around senior football for a few seasons now, after being tagged a future talent. But now he gets to glove up for his biggest challenge, his A-League debut.
I spent a lot of time in that, and old NSL as well. I spent a lot of time, so yeah, can't wait for it.
The biggest job for the young Kennedy was getting him to boss his more senior players around from the back. A bit hard when you consider one of those is captain Paul Ocon, who once led the Socceroos.
Yeah, it's very, very hard. You know, he's played for Australia and that, so, but, you know, I've got to do it. Like, that's my job, so, yeah, just got to do it.
Injury has disrupted the back line with Jade North out, but the coach has a ready replacement through New Zealand's Stephen Old.
Well, the Kiwi international will slot straight in, and of course Durante's fit for the match and Paul Ocon's getting significantly fitter, so overall I'm not that unhappy.
The fact striker Joel Griffiths failed to complete today's training may have, but he's expected to be fine for Sunday's opener in Auckland.
Herceptin's discovery was a medical breakthrough for breast cancer sufferers. Its inclusion on the pharmaceutical benefits scheme a welcome reward for the women who took the risk to join its clinical trial without knowing its side effects or if the costly drug would bring any benefit at all.
This is very important for the researchers and the women on the trial who took part. There were 14,000 women, more than 40 countries, 5 trials, all with the same results. So it's rock solid data that this is a valuable active drug.
The drug, which was trialled in the hunter, is clinically proven to fight the disease and improve survival rates. Researchers are now looking at the benefits of extending its use to a 2-year treatment.
We'll have results on that probably by this time next year of whether 2 years is better than 1 year. Maybe it's something that you have to keep taking long term.
It works regarding the size and type of cancer.
It attacks this protein and destroys the cancer cell. It doesn't work if the HER2 antigen is not on the surface, but it's very effective if it is.
While the potentially life-saving treatment did cost up to $50,000 a year, its listing will see users pay just $29.50 per script every 3 weeks from October. Christy Carter, NBN News.
Cardinal George Pell began his adventurous day in Newcastle with a helicopter flight from Sydney. So taken with the divine views, he posed for a photograph with the helicopter.
We followed the coast. It's really spectacular, so it's the way to go.
Next stop was a civic function where he revealed Newcastle's planned involvement in the lead-up to World Youth Day in 2008. The Maitland-Newcastle Diocese has already hired a local coordinator for the huge event.
So we could expect 3,000 to 5,000 pilgrims coming here the week before World Youth Day. World Youth Day is actually a week of activities. So the week before that they have a thing called Days in the Diocese.
After being given a glass paperweight depicting nobbies as a gift from the city, he boarded the Newcastle pilot cutter for a harbour cruise to see the famous headland in person. Then it was back ashore and onto the famous tram for another tour. It's thought today's orientation will help ensure that Newcastle plays a significant role in the World Youth Day events. After all that fresh air, the busy Archbishop will surely sleep well tonight, that is, after his civic dinner. Paul Lobb, NBN News.
To learn in a classroom, you learn the basics, you learn the theory, but to be able to apply those things in a practical sense and make sure that they're effective on the day, you really need to have days like today.
Thanks to modern global positioning systems, seafarers know where they are on the planet at any moment. But over a century ago, when even an accurate clock was a luxury, it was much harder to navigate. So when Customs House was built in 1876, a time ball was fitted to the spire.
It was the only means available to captains of ships in port to check their chronometers, which was an important, accurate clock, which allowed them to determine longitude.
The ball stopped working in 1941, was restored in 88 for the Queen's visit, but broke again during the 89 earthquake. The Port Corporation has restored it again, and today it rose to the top of the pole at 5-1 and descended on the hour, allowing sea captains to check their clocks.
Because we had no radio signals, and they had no possible way of checking the accuracy of their clocks, except when they were in port. So many ports in the world had time balls.
If the mechanism holds up, the ball will drop at 1 p.m. daily, just as it used to a century ago. Paul Lobb, NBN News.
Stray dogs can be unpredictable and cause major headaches as they wander aimlessly. For that reason, the RSPCA wants them off the streets and out of harm's way. Earlier this week, an RSPCA employee told the Lake Macquarie man who found this dog that if he couldn't either deliver it to the RSPCA or hold on to it, he should simply let it go. RSPCA CEO Bernie Murphy says that advice should never have been given.
That's most unfortunate that was said. We certainly don't advocate that. By letting the dog go, you could well compound your problem. The dog could be a nuisance on the road and could get hurt.
Luckily, in this case, the dog was eventually taken to the animal shelter and it looks like he'll have a happy ending.
He's fine. The owner has advised us that he'll be coming out to get the dog in the next couple of days.
Mr Murphy says due to financial restraints, the RSPCA doesn't pick up strays. That's usually left to the local council.
If a stray is injured, yes, our ambulance will pick them up and bring them in and give them care, but the first point of call is always the council. It's their responsibility.
Madeline Bond, NBN News.
Since moving back into the NBN Soccer League in 1999, Adamstown has seen a steady decline in results. President Ken Hodgins says financial restraints forced the club to rely on a youth policy. But this season, the first grade squad hit its lowest point, 2 wins from 18 games.
Thought that we might have been able to just to improve a little bit. Obviously we haven't. There's areas there that need to be targeted for next year.
Despite finishing on top of the region's second division competition, Dudley Redhead failed to meet requirements for promotion to the top flight, gifting Adamstown a start next season in first grade. The club is expected to decide on a coach tonight, with caretaker boss Mark Trenter the current frontrunner. Adamstown believes Trenter has the ability to attract new high-profile players.
He played 4 years in the Premier League in England. He's played National League in Australia here. He's played for KB United in the 80s. He got the passion. He's got the passion back, he said, and, he was a bit concerned that Adamstown, wasn't getting results.
Playing for over 115 years in their traditional red and green, Rosebuds are hoping to emulate another club that's also preparing for a return to the top.
And South Sydney's rebuilding for next year, so hopefully we can, make a stronger year in 2007 for red and green.
Mitchell Hughes, NBN News.
A Newcastle District Court jury found Andrew John Catalaris guilty in March of cultivating a large commercial quantity of cannabis on this property at Salisbury near Dungog. The January 2005 raid by police uncovered a total of almost 50,000 plants. In opening submissions on sentence, the Crown today informed Judge Ralph Coulihan that Andrew Catalaris is now no longer a medical practitioner. The court heard the 51-year-old from Sydney had had his right to practice revoked by the state's medical tribunal for professional misconduct. Prosecuting solicitor Fiona Gray added Catalaris should not be shown leniency because of any prior good character, on the grounds that his planting of the crop was a misguided political statement and there was a complete disregard for the law. While Defence Counsel Linda McSpedden argued Catalaris knew he had to have a licence to grow the crop, it was not a matter for a custodial sentence, saying the effects of his actions had been cataclysmic, his career almost terminally compromised. Judge Coulihan reserved judgment until September 12 and adjourned the case, telling Andrew Catalaris his sentence would not involve a period of custody. Gary Blair, NBN News.